Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
We want to be a place that people come to. We want to be a destination people come to come talk about football. So we're 100% open. I tell every high school coach, like, you want to come to practice, you come anytime you want, but we also wanted to have a really good clinic. I think it's really important, I hired some people that the coaches maybe aren't comfortable, familiar with. And so to sit there and listen to Terrence Knighton, Garrett McGuire clinic and the level of detail and knowledge, I think that helps our program. And we had coaches from Texas. This week we had coaches from Albany, New York. We had obviously coaches from Nebraska, from the Dakotas. So people came from a long way. So to get close to 400 people here for our first clinic's great, and it'll just continue to grow.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker Fan Sports Show.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, Matt's Rhule edition.
Hey.
I'm your host, Honke, and I'm with Mac.
Well, hey guys, how's it going? Hey, great day today. Perfect weather. Fantastic out.
Yeah.
Got down my first application of pre-emergent weed and feed, so that's looking good. And it was a bunch of Husker content to listen to while I was doing it. It was a fantastic day. How about yourself?
Did you listen to Adam Carricker on the fan forum yesterday? Of course not. That's all right. I didn't know it was out yet. That's the beauty of the podcast.
You put all these advanced ones on all the time. I don't know it's hard to know it's real.
But you can always listen to that later. The beauty of the podcast. Well, tonight we're going to talk a little bit of the coaches clinic that went on last weekend here in Lincoln.
Yes.
And joining us, making a repeat visit to the Redcast, is York Dukes football coach Glen Snodgrass. Welcome back, Coach.
Hey, Coach.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mac and I have a special kind of affinity for the coaches clinic. We went there from the last year of Solich, 2003, the first when Bo was introduced as the DC, all the way up until COVID, and then we stopped doing that after that.
I would come back from Colorado to do coaches clinics. That was it was a high point of the spring for us.
Yeah, and we would do it. We were youth football coaches for a number of years. I even ran our program as a AD there for about 3 or 4 years. So that's how we got in there, and then we kind of kept going. And then eventually it was like, we probably should stop going. We're not coaches, but you are, and this is why we don't feel bad bringing you on to talk about it. So
vicariously,
we're going to live vicariously through you here. So through the pork chop dinners and all that they do. Before we do that, let's go over a couple of our upcoming shows here real quick. And next Wednesday night, we'll have Brandon Kavanaugh on Wednesday, April 12th at 8 p.m., a fan forum. He's the Husker college football analyst with Athlon Sports. Next up, of course, is the Redcast store. Mac and I are wearing Redcast hats right now that we got through it. And last but not least, this is the Sam Foltz Memorial Kicking Camp. It's going to be Friday, July 7th from 12 to 4 p.m. at Grand Island Senior High School. Coach, you might even have some guys that can be making it out to here on this one. July 7th. Jamie Cole with Cole's Kicking is putting it on. You can learn more at forever27.org. That's all spelled out. The numbers are spelled out too. And 100% of the proceeds go to the SF27 Foundation.
That's cool.
All right. Well, we have a new coaching staff, and this is their first year that they did a coaches clinic. And I want to start to kind of get your thoughts on what you saw. And maybe a way to do that, Coach, would be tweets of the week. I'm going to start with this. Ed Foley back in December went across the state, and I tweeted at you, and this is actually January 23rd. I tweeted at you that hey, he's coming out your way. You should have him stop by York. And you responded like a few minutes later, and you're like, yeah, he already did a couple weeks ago. So this coaching staff is definitely put in the time. They put in the effort. They went to over 100 schools. What was it like having Coach Foley coming into your office? How did he set that up, and how have the relationships started to be built?
Yeah, it was I just got a call from somebody in the office up there and said that he was coming down, and I was kind of excited to get to know somebody on the staff because I didn't know anybody on that staff. I kind of knew Coach Rhule a little bit, I guess, from the year before, but other than that, I didn't know anybody. So I was excited to get him in there and just kind of get a feel for what they were going to be like and what he was going to be like. And we had a great conversation. I don't think he necessarily went to every place because every school he went to had a Division I or a Big Ten caliber player. I think they were trying to get out and make relationships and kind of just get their name out there. So we had a great conversation. We hung out for probably, 45 minutes, I suppose. And, talked about our team, talked about our kids in the area. And he just wanted to get to know about all the schools, what's York High School all about? What are some of the traditions? And I think he kind of knew that I had a son that played and some other of the York kids that were on the team. So, it was, he just wanted to talk. And I just think they really, those guys aren't from Nebraska. And, other than what you see on SportsCenter, they probably didn't know a ton about what Nebraska was all about. And I just think they were trying to just get a feel for the state pretty much. And obviously, I think every staff, I've been around since Solich. Every new staff does this. Every one of them. I mean, Bill Callahan's staff did it. Pelini's staff did it. Riley's staff did it. Frost's staff did it. I don't know if any of them did it quite to the extent that Coach Foley did. I remember when Frost's staff came in, they sent all the coaches out all over the state. So I think it's kind of a typical thing that a lot of staffs do at the beginning, just to kind of, like I said, get their names out there and start to develop relationships, and that's going to be hard for any staff to do for 2 and 3 and 4 years, because you just can't expend all that time and energy and manpower year after year. But, Coach Foley, boy, he definitely put the miles on. And he's the perfect guy to do it because he's just really relatable and such an easygoing, just blue collar guy that's easy to talk to. And it was a really good experience.
And that's cool. And one thing, anyone, if you watch the fan forum that you and I did last summer, Coach, we're not here. The last thing we're going to do is sit here and crap on the previous staff. No. That's not what this is about. We're not built that way. And I know you're not. So it's never a comparison. How did these guys do it versus the last one? I think it's interesting to hear your perspective because you've been around doing what you've been doing as a championship coach at both York and Overton. So over the course of 2 decades, you've been doing this through multiple coaching staff. So I think it's to get that comparison and I also think it's good to hear that, sometimes I think the Kool-Aid starts flowing right now where everything's great. And it's like, oh my God, this is the first staff to ever do this. And I like what they're doing. I think it's great what they're doing, but it's also not necessarily unique.
I appreciate you saying that too, because I thought the same thing. I'm like, because I remember there was a big push when Frost first got here that they went throughout the state, and rightfully so on both sides. But it just, it is kind of recency bias all the time with like, well, look at how this staff is recruiting the state. I'm like, but moving on from that, they have reached out to you. They have made contact with you. You do have a son on the team, so that kind of puts you in a unique perspective. But before I go any further, we talked about our swag earlier. That shirt of yours, I see the 41. It looks like it's a highway. My wife, I know your son's 41, but is this a special branding thing? Because that is an awesome shirt.
My wife's where she grew up, the home she grew up in down by Adams. She grew up on Highway 41. She drove Highway 41 to school, and then some parent friends of ours had a shirt similar to this to their son, and my wife saw it and thought, "Wow, Garrett's number 41." I grew up on. So I bought this shirt. I had it made, and we put it on social media. Yeah, I wasn't trying to sell anything.
No.
But I bet you had 100 different people call me and want to buy one. So
100. I've already kind of thought about it.
A lot of people, just from a social media tweet, maybe a Facebook or something. So it's probably awesome. My favorite shirt. So
that's fantastic. Sorry, I didn't mean to get sidetracked. Go ahead.
No. Well, and when Foley went across the state there in January, we're from Columbus, and when he sent his photos out that day, when he social media'd out, he went to Scotus, he went to Lakeview, he went to Columbus High, he went to Schuyler. I mean, you got to be smart about it with what you're doing. But I love how this staff has really made a point of like, we're not going out to see one place and then coming back. I mean, we're going to go out there and we're going to make those relationships. And I'm sure when he was out there seeing you, and it was York, Central City, probably Seward, just whatever. There's a whole slew of them right around there. And he hit 8-man schools. They hit 11-man. I mean, they hit a little bit of everything. So at the same token that we said that it's not necessarily unique what they did, it no lessens the fact that it's important what they're doing. And I'm glad to see that they've kind of set those roots up early.
Yeah, and as I said, I've seen every staff do it, but I will say I think Coach Foley went above and beyond. I mean, he was like a week or more, or whatever it was, and he wasn't just cruising up and down the interstate and stopping by the easy places. I mean, he was getting off the beaten path and going to a lot of different schools. So I will say that, they've all done it, but I will say I think these guys did maybe more. Coach Foley at least did more than most.
And we had that the promo at the beginning for the Sam Foltz kicking camp. But that was one of the stories of Foley being out in Greeley area and going to see Foltz parents. And just that takes, on top of having, I think, a really savvy staff and Coach Rhule is very good at what he does. I think there's the influence of Trev, and somebody in the program has to have that kind of knowledge to be able to embark that on those guys, where it's like, oh yeah, there's somebody really important. You should go out there and see them. And I think that's just great. And there were some coaches along the way too. Again, this is not to say anything about previous staffs, but there were some coaches that said, hey, this is the first time we've had a Husker staff come here in a while. So that is cool that they definitely went out of their way to see as many places as they could.
And that kind of speaks to that alignment they always talk about. I mean, it's probably incumbent upon Trev to make sure that these messages get to these coaching staff, but the coaching staff still has to embrace the idea of going out there and doing it. And like to what you said with Coach Foley, going above and beyond, not just embracing it, but taking it to the next level and really ingratiating himself, which is so important to this state. Everybody talks about how Nebraska is different, but it truly is. Where the university is the only game in town. So you like the coaching from these, schools throughout the state are so important. Those connections are so important. So I'm glad to hear that they're taking it seriously, I guess is probably the best way to look at it. It's like they're just taking it seriously. We'll see if it maintains, right? Momentum's everything. Yeah. Winning cures all too. So it's like, I'll take one at consistency and the reaching out or winning. I actually kind of like winning at first, but we'll see.
Another cool thing he did is, he's taken the special teams role incredibly seriously. Yeah. And, you mentioned he went and visited the Foltz family, Gerald Foltz, and he mentioned trying to reach out to the Mahers and the Henrys and the different special teams legends that we have right here in Nebraska, trying to get the feeling of, the feel of what kinds of things they did to be great special kickers and punters over the years. So he specifically reached out to a lot of those special teams families too. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Today they had Coach Foley and Bushini, the punter. They had some of the special teams people talking during the
he's high on Bushimi the way he was talking about him.
Yeah. And to speak of,
he put on a clinic, speaking of clinics.
Well, and one of the recruits that we got this year, Albano, the kicker from Omaha West Side, there's an in-state kid that they got a scholarship to him as a kicker, and he's going to be competing for that spot right away. Well, we started talking about how the coaches went out to see all of you. And I think this was important. I think it was important that they made those trips in December and January. But what was great about this last weekend in the coaches clinic is it's the reverse. It's the opportunity for all of you coaches out in the schools all across the state and beyond to make that trip to Lincoln and to see the staff. And so it was great to see all the social media photos I was seeing, people posting them coming back here. To get it started off, I guess just from a traditional standpoint, usually the head coach comes out, kind of does the introduction, and then there's a bunch of different sessions where assistant coaches will go and lead them. So assuming nothing changed drastic with that from a previous one that we would have gone to, how was how did it flow? How did the intro with Coach Rhule, and how did you get the introductions to start meeting with some of the assistants?
What we're trying to find out is, were there pork chops?
Yeah. It was a little bit different. It was in the West Stadium on the third and fourth floor up there, and it's never been there before. Part of it, Coach Osborne and the meal was out in the Hawks, but the bulk of the clinic was actually up in the stadium, and that was kind of cool. It just jumped right into the assistant coaches speak, and so we got off the elevator and we sat down, and Coach Rhule started talking about inside zone and just how they different blocking techniques that they use, run block and pass block. And then they just had every session, they had an offensive and a defensive coach, just a Nebraska coach, assistant coach talking about a certain topic. So, I think there was 5 different sessions, 5 different 50-minute sessions that you could hit. So, I listened to half of the staff speak, and I tried to kind of switch it up between offense and defense so I can get as good of a a mixture of all of them as I possibly could. Coach Rhule didn't do a whole lot. He basically introduced Coach Osborne, and that's when I had to leave. So I didn't catch all of Coach Osborne's speech. But, Coach Rhule didn't actually give a big, long presentation. It was mostly the assistant coaches that did the heavy work. And then Saturday morning, there was a little FCA session, and then the weightlifting, Coach Campbell and the weightlifting strength and conditioning coaches did a little session, and then it was right into practice from there. So it was. I actually really liked it, because when I go to these things, I like getting the nuts and the bolts. How do you teach your running backs to hold the ball? What are your mechanics of block, and what are your the wide receiver coach.
McGuire,
wide receiver coach, Garrett, Coach McGuire. Is that right? McGuire.
Yep.
He spoke about RPOs. I was blown out of the water. I was blown away by him. He was very impressive, and and everybody talks about him being 23 years old. Well, you wouldn't have been able to tell if he was 23 or 43. He was very well spoken.
How does he? That's
really
a great.
good
That's
what he did.
I'd be interested, because he's in that coaching element. No matter how you slice it, he's a young man. How did he handle himself? It was pretty genuine the way he's with a bunch of grown men, I'm sure.
Well, I was he couldn't have given too many clinic presentations, I wouldn't think, going up to that. And there's probably 200 plus guys in the room, old veteran coaches, and he's a young guy. And I was, like I said, I was really impressed. He was I was as impressed by him as I was anybody the whole day, to be quite honest with you. And that's not putting down anybody else. He did a very, very good job and handled himself well. Like I said, you would never believe he was 23 years old by listening to his session. And it was some pretty technically high level stuff. And obviously you're not going to be the wide receiver coach at the University of Nebraska unless you're really good at what you do and those technical things. But yeah, he was real good. I was very impressed by him.
Now, throughout the years, do you kind of follow a similar pattern and the coaches that you tend to watch? Do you usually catch the O-line coach, or do you try to vary it?
Oh, I'm a quarterback coach and a linebacker coach. I'm the offensive coordinator. I love linebackers. That's just one of my favorites. I love coaching the linebackers. So I always go to the linebacker sessions. I listened to Coach Rhule for 5 straight years, and then this year listening to Coach Dvorak was very good. And it's interesting because Coach Dvorak's a fair amount different than Coach Rhule is. There's new techniques and things are just different than what Coach Rhule did. But, that's coaching. There's multiple different ways to skin a cat, and none of them are necessarily right or wrong, just a lot of different ways to do it. So, and then I like to talk. I obviously like to listen to the quarterback coaches too. I like to get, my goal every clinic season is to pick up at least one, if not play one series of plays that I want to try and implement. And so I always want to kind of hit those offensive sessions. And that's why that wide receiver session, Coach McGuire was so good with the RPOs. I got some real good stuff from him there. So, awesome. And like I said, I'm more into the nuts and bolts. I am huge. And, without going into too much, I'm really big. The culture is big with me. Leadership is big with me. And all those things are super important. I get a lot of that stuff from books and videos and all that. When I go to the University of Nebraska, like I said, I want to know, how does Coach Rhule teach the inside zone? What are the steps and the footwork Coach Dvorak's, using? What are the mechanics of the quarterback, how they're throwing the ball? So those are the things I tend to hit. And I was really looking forward to Coach Osborne, but I had a family thing in the evening and I had to take off and go. So I did miss that. And that's one thing. I talked to Coach Rhule and Coach Foley the next morning at practice, and they said they were going to send me a video of it. So I'm hoping to get that at some point so I can at least watch it. So, Did you
get a chance to see Raiola last year versus in this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think last year I watched him on the field doing some coaching. They did. He kind of had his offensive line together out in the field house, and he was doing some technique work there with them, and that's kind of where I got to watch him. His stuff is very similar. Obviously, the play is different, but he's not going to change the techniques he teaches too much, I wouldn't think. I don't think the things he talked about Friday were not different than we talked about a year ago.
That's kind of what I was wondering actually. It was because, and I don't know if that was like a bit of a conflict with Whipple or not, but I mean that's obviously why this current staff retained him, is because of the style or whatever school that he subscribes to in terms of blocking. But the other thing is, a lot of the drills that they show these little tidbits of sights and sounds of practice you can see, and the lineman drills to me, and this is just a very brief view of it, but it just seems like I see us moving more with our offensive linemen. It's a lot more running blocks and getting into them, and they're going 10, 15 yards versus just, kind of footwork shuffling. And that just looks a little bit different to my eye. But that's such a snidbit. But I was just wondering if there was any difference that you might have saw in terms of practice and how the offensive line was maybe doing drills. I know you probably, you guys did get to see scrimmage. So
I think they're trying to slim him down
it looks like it,
a little bit. Yeah, I mean,
more flexibility
too,
right?
To move, like just what you just said. They want him to be able to get in the open field and get to that second level and block those linebackers and maybe a little more effectively. And so, they, like Bryce Benhart, he's one of the largest humans I've ever been around in my life, but he just looked slender compared to previous years, and I think that's a kind of a concerted effort they're trying to do to, 305, 310, that's plenty. They don't need to be 340, 350. So they want them to be able to move.
Well, and if they can't bend, it's no good anyway.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the things of my critiques of maybe the previous regime in terms of, like, I just didn't feel like our offensive linemen improved physically that much. We got bigger and stronger, but it just seemed like our mobility went down. And I do think, just from the little bits that I've seen, it looks like our O-line's moving a little better, and they all look a little trimmer to me.
Yeah.
But it's like whatever the flavor of the month is, Some staff will come in and go, "We're too small, we got to get bigger," and I'd be like, "Yeah," and the next staff comes in, "We got to get smaller and faster." I'm like, "Yeah, we just win."
And I'm not going to dog on Coach Duvall and the strength staff or anything, because I think Duvall did a very good job. Because when Duvall took over, I remember sitting in some of those pre-games when Garrett was a recruit, and our guys would be on the field, and then Wisconsin or Iowa would run out, and I'd be like, "Oh my goodness, we're in big trouble," because they were so much bigger. So Duvall had to get us bigger and stronger. Now, I think this new staff is, and you said this word multiple times, I think mobility is a big focal point with this new staff, just being able to move. I remember a couple years ago, Coach Saban at Alabama mentioned, our strength and conditioning is all about speed. It is obviously they want big, strong guys, but their strength and conditioning is all about fast, explosive guys that can move. And I kind of get the feeling with these guys, it's kind of very similar to that. Okay. Yeah, we want them to get bigger and stronger for sure. So they're lifting hard, but the mobility portion of it is, I think, stressed a lot more.
Maybe that's what it is.
Injury prevention, fewer soft tissue injuries, those types of things. So again, not necessarily that the previous strength staff was wrong, but they're just doing it a little bit differently, and they want them to be able to move a little bit better and be a little bit more mobile.
Yeah, a little different philosophy. I know they said with the O linemen that they even took the knee braces off them in practice, that they're not, they weren't using those. But, back in December, I went over to Alumni Hall, downtown Lincoln, one of our sponsors, and they were doing a pipeline jerky event. And we had some members of last year's pipeline there. And one of them was Kevin Williams. And it was right before Kevin left, but I was talking with him, and Benhart was there too. And Benhart, big dude, just like you said, he's probably the biggest guy, one of the biggest humans I've ever seen. But Kevin Williams said he wasn't going to knock anything with Duvall. He's like, Duvall did his job. He got us big. We were strong. We could move a house. He goes, just within the first couple of weeks of being with the new staff at that time, he was like, there's just a different emphasis on mobility, and we'll see what happens with it. And I've talked with other people on this show since then. I think it was Cody Glenn I had on, and I was talking with him about the transition between Callahan and Pelini, and two different strength coaches, and they just – they do something a little different. Dave Kennedy did things a little different than what James Dobson did. Not that one's right or wrong. It's just we're going to go in a different path. And I can tell you, seeing the photos of Benhart right now and seeing the video of him today versus what I saw in person there in December, he does look different. So it is interesting. I'm looking forward to see how that can affect the line, maybe having a little more of that mobility. But
two quick things. First of all, I was someone explained it to me as Coach Duvall's staff wanted you to move 500 pounds this far, and Coach Campbell wants you to move 400 pounds this far. So maybe not quite as much weight, but a little bit more range of motion. Like I said, the mobility part of it's huge. And the second quick story is Bryce Benhart was Garrett's roommate right when they moved into the dorm room. And we didn't know who Bryce, we kind of knew just from the recruiting videos and all those things, but he walked into the dorm and I looked up like this and I'm like, holy cow, hello, Mr. Benhart. And when he left and I go, Garrett, I just have one bit of advice for you. And that is take the top bunk and not the bottom bunk.
For sure.
That's a large man.
Yeah.
That is a large man.
That is great advice.
That would be the end of you.
And
it's crazy that
they're the biggest boys I've ever been around. I don't get intimidated very often, but when I'm standing by those two dudes, they're big.
Hey man, that's just the thing though with this team. We've got some monsters on this team, and I'm not convinced that some of these guys can't get a hell of a lot better with just a little bit more guided coaching. And just what, and again, we're not trashing on the other staff, but it just seems like the focus is a little bit clearer with the staff, and I think a lot of guys can benefit from that. So it would be nice to see, because a lot of these guys have grinded and you've never heard anything bad about most of these players. They all work hard. That's what you hear about. You've heard about that from jump. Great attitudes, great kids, work hard. It would be nice for them.
Coach, you get to hit this from a couple different angles. You are a in-state coach. You do it from a recruiting standpoint. You've talked with these coaches as a coach. You're also a parent of a player on the team. What is it like right now as a parent? How have listening to your son talk, listening to your son's friends talk, how has that transition been? We haven't seen this mass exodus of players, at least up to this point. In fact, we have 105 or whatever the number of scholarships. We actually have to still get that number down. But I think that's a positive on how this staff is certainly treating players, that you haven't just seen people. We've seen a coach a state to the west of us come in and say, hey, get the hell out of here. This staff is certainly working with these players and wants to see them succeed. And if they can't succeed here, then they want to see them succeed somewhere else.
Well, it's, these kids have really been through the ringer for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, all those close games and those gut punches at the end. And, it's been 4 years of it, and last year was rough, and when Coach Rhule came in, that was basically these guys' third coaching staff they've had in 6 months, and so there was definitely, I think, a little bit of a feeling that this guy's got to earn our respect, because we've been through a lot, and they loved Mickey Joseph, and that obviously didn't go right at the end, and so there was this coach had to earn their respect, and I really feel like Coach Rhule did that fast. I think he's such a relationship guy. I mean, he wants to get to know every kid on that team. And it doesn't matter if you're the starting quarterback or a walk-on, who's never going to play. I think he takes as much time as he can with all of them. And what I've heard from the kids is they feel like these guys are going out of their way to get to know them, to build relationships. And I think it's been pretty incredible how fast they've been able to do that and how fast the kids feel comfortable with them. I've been to a couple practices now, and my wife came to practice on Friday with me, and Garrett was over there doing some drill, and one of the office ladies saw that we were there, and they said, "Oh, you guys got to come over here and talk to Coach Rhule." So another person went all the way across the field, grabbed Garrett, and pulled him out. And Garrett's like, "What are we doing here?" And pulled Garrett all the way across because they wanted Garrett to be there with me and Allison and I when we talked to Coach Rhule. And, he talked about how important family is and how he wanted – and, in Garrett's mind, he's thinking, all right, Dad, shut up. I got to get back to this drill work. That time with family and him getting to know Allison and I and Garrett, Dalton was not there. He was over at UNK to practice, but getting to know us as a family, it was important to him. And he talked to us, and then Garrett went back to his drill, but he talked to Allison and I for probably close to 10 minutes, I bet. And that was in the middle of a practice. And it was just because he knew, and I had met him before, but he had never met my wife. And so that was just how important it was. And he talked a lot about how important family was and how we're welcome at practice and the coaches are welcome at practice anytime. And, they want families to come on Saturdays if they possibly can. But, I was told that I could come to practices as a coach. So I was very, very impressed. Coach Foley came over and talked with us, and all the coaches during practice took the time to stop and say hi to us and get to know us. So they're not only trying to get to know the kids better, they're trying to get to know the families better. And they've already had Coach Dvorak had only been there for like 2 days, and they had a meet and greet, which we've never done that before. They just got us all together up on the third floor of the East Stadium, and they brought in food, and it was just all the coaches and all the recruiting people and as many parents that can make it, just walking around and talking, just getting to know and building relationships.
Okay.
And then they had another family meal, which I wasn't able to get to last week, where the kids were encouraged, bring your girlfriend, bring your aunt, uncle, mom, dad, whatever. And they wanted them to bring family in. So they're really making it an emphasis. Another cool thing they're doing is they're having a mom's night the day before the spring game. And my wife is fired up because one of the things on the itinerary is tackle your son. And so he's been having me teach her all these techniques of how she can take him out.
Oh my God.
And so it's just in this short amount of time. And, who knows if it'll keep going this way, but they're not just saying it. They're really doing it. They're making a serious effort to really get to know the kids. It's easy for them to get to know the kids, but it's hard to get to know the parents, and they're really trying hard. So we appreciate that. And, it makes us feel even more comfortable with who's taking care of our boy.
That's just music to my ears, honestly, everything that you just said, because that's how I kind of envisioned Nebraska should be, especially with the local families, and really it's just nice to hear what they're saying out front in the cameras is what's happened in the back end too. Because lots of times, just as fans, you can read what's on the message boards, you can read what's in the papers, and you can kind of read between the lines on a press conference, maybe
listen to a dumb podcast,
right? Exactly, but you can't really know how he's actually talking to parents, and you can't actually know how he's actually interacting with the players, and to hear that to me is just like, okay, that's validation of what I'm seeing. The man presents himself in front of the cameras is what's going on in the background, and that means a lot to me. Just as a Nebraskan, as how I want my coach to be. Like, I'm like, okay, this is a guy I can get behind. This is a guy I'm excited about. He just, the more I hear about it, he just comes across as a guy who kind of has it figured out to an extent. Like, the reason he can talk to you during the middle of a practice, is because he's a coacher of coaches, and they can run the practice, and he can monitor it, a little bit in the background. And what a great,
that's a very Devaney kind of way to run a practice.
But those are the charmers, right? Those are the coaches that people love, because they can spend time with you and they can make a connection, and it seems important and it seems genuine from to hear you talk about it. So that's, like I said, that's just music to my ears.
He's very approachable, and you always saw pictures with people with Frost and Riley and all those, Pelini and all those guys. But Coach Rhule is he just kind of seems like an everyman. I mean, he's just kind of a normal guy out there. And I think people just feel comfortable coming up and talking to him. And then when you actually do talk to him, he acts the same way as he looks. I mean, he's just a nice, normal guy. I mean, cool. He is easy to talk to, and very, very approachable. So I just, just a blue collar guy. He's not, there's been a lot of coaches, and whether it's an assistant, not just at Nebraska, I've dealt with so many coaching staffs over the years, but you get a lot of, I'm a D1 coach and you're just a little high school guy, and we're a little bit bigger than you, or more important than you.
Right.
I felt like Frost's staff was really good in that regard too, where they were very approachable. But these guys, and Coach Rhule in particular, they're very much the same. They put themselves on the same level as you. It's easy for those guys to kind of, if they wanted to, to kind of big time you a little bit.
Sure.
They're not doing that one bit. And, obviously, I'm a head coach at a high school in Nebraska that sent them some kids. So, they want to make a good relationship with me, but I don't feel like they treat me any different than anybody. I mean, they're super nice to all of them. So it's definitely a breath of fresh air for sure.
Oh, that's great.
I think of actually a statement that Callahan made back in the day. He goes, "They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And it was
a lot of people say that.
Yeah. But it still means something too. I mean, like we've talked about this.
Yeah, I'm not about. Yeah,
we've talked about this on this show, you and me, Mac, about that. there are times that we've lost a lot of the close games the last few years, and we'd hear it was little things. And we broke that down one time. Like, what is a little thing versus a basic or a fundamental of football? And to me, a little thing isn't special teams or isn't a mistake that we made on the field, penalties, turnovers. A little thing are the things that you just talked about. Hey, bring the family over here. No one sees that. Nobody, and nobody knows that happens, unless we talk about it on a podcast. But it's important, right? It's a little thing, but it adds up. And I'm hearing all these little anecdotal stories, one after another. The story in Bellevue West about the wife works at Bellevue East and made cookies. And when he went over to Bellevue East, he thanked her, in class, for the cookies she made. And those are little things, but they do add up. And it's that relationship building and they don't care how much you know until you know how much they care. And it seems like he cares enough to want to do that and build those relationships. So I think that's great.
Yeah. He talks about earning the right to coach him hard. And I think that's kind of goes along the same lines. It's just all
that's a part of building a culture. All those, and there are no little things. They're all big things. All those, like you said, all those little things add up. But they're all a part of building a culture, which he's obviously trying to build a family culture. And I always remember Coach Osborne talking about unity is the most important thing in any team. And if you really talk about family, you're talking about the kids, you're talking about everybody involved in the program, the family and the kids. And so, I would agree 100% that all those little things definitely add up. You put all those things together, and then maybe the kids will fight just a little harder, and maybe they'll find a way to get that extra first down, or maybe whatever. But I also think that it's not just those, I don't want to call them selfish reasons, but I also think he just does it because he cares about the kids. Yeah. I've only known Coach Rhule for a couple months. I'm just kind of thinking, though, I'm assuming just kind of what I've got to know about him so far. It's just, I think he just genuinely cares about the kids. And, I think his dad was a pastor. I heard somewhere along the line, and he just seems like a genuinely caring guy who just wants the best for all the boys that go down there and play for him.
It's been interesting to me a little bit how quickly T.O. has jumped on board with Matt Rhule too. Yeah. I know Trev has a lot to do with that, but I don't know if you got a chance to see that round table with him and Trev.
Part of it.
it's really good. And,
I need to watch
and T.O. you can clearly tell isn't just sitting there to look good. He's talking, he's engaging, I know you didn't get to see him talk at the coaches clinic, but it sounded like it was really good. It sounded like he was really engaged and kind of fired up and giving good knowledge. So, that stamp of approval from Tom kind of goes a long way for me. And it's just kind of interesting because obviously he loved Frost. Frost was one of his guys, but for him to so quickly embrace the next guy, I think is important.
Well, and talking to Coach Rhule and Coach Foley at practice on Saturday morning, it was really cool to see the kind of the reverence that they had when they talked about Coach Osborne, and just how they were almost starstruck a little bit when they got to talk to him for the first time and got to meet him. I'm 100% that way still. I met him several times, but it's still, holy cow, that's Tom Osborne. I remember the first time ever Garrett was a recruit as a sophomore in high school. And I'd been coaching for a while at that point, but we went there and somebody introduced Garrett to Coach Osborne, and I'm sitting in the background like, oh, geez, he had to shake his hand, I'm like sweating. And he came over and he goes, "Hi, Coach Snodgrass, how you doing?" I'm like, oh my God, Tom Osborne knows my name. It was a really big deal to me, and I thought it was pretty cool. And then Garrett, about a month ago, they were doing their spring thing where they had to take a picture with some Hall of Famers, and Garrett. And most of the guys just took pictures in front of the Hall of Fame pictures. Well, Garrett got a selfie with actually Tom Osborne and Trev Albert. So he got two Hall of Famers at once.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
He called me and he goes, we were talking for a while, and he goes, "Oh, Dad, Coach Osborne told me to tell you hi." I'm like, "Oh, wow." It just still is. That's cool. He's kind of my hero. He is. Ever since I was a little kid, Tom Osborne was a big thing. I've read every book that's ever written. And a major, major part of my coaching philosophy comes from those books and just what Tom Osborne did as a coach. How would you not want to be like that guy?
That's amazing.
He's incredible. And the fact that he's still, able to come out and wow a group of 400 coaches today is pretty awesome.
That's really cool.
I love it. I love hearing it. I love seeing him out there. I love seeing him engaged with the program still at his age. It's all good. the kids call it a vibe these days, like when something's going good. But the vibe right now down in Lincoln is good. It's really good.
Well, and I think maybe this is the good segue. We're kind of at the halfway point.
Okay.
And if I had to define,
Bring us back home now.
Well,
We've
no,
kind
no.
of been meandering.
No, if I had to kind of give an overview of this part one, it's you said it, Coach. It's about culture. We talked about recruiting. We talked about relationship building as a parent, as a coach, what the coaches were like, how they interacted. And I think all that leads up to, I called it little things and basics, but the reality is it's culture. You're right. All these little things add up, and it is a big thing. It creates the culture. So that's part one of this.
All right.
Now, if you came to this show and you're like, well, when are they going to start talking about the players and the practice and what they do? That's what we're going into now.
That sounds good.
That's what we can talk about.
Right.
That's part two of this now. And this is the basics. This is the fundamentals. This is the things that if we're going to be good,
The Jimmies and the Joes.
the Jimmies and the Joes, all the mistakes that led to little one score losses over the last few years, you get them fixed in practice. And coach has talked about how practice is the most important time. I'm sure you have your own thoughts on that as a coach too, about how important this is. So let's just start with that part first. On Saturday morning, they went for about 45 minutes of practice before they went to the scrimmage. So what did you see, Coach? What were some of the things that caught your eye in those first 45 minutes before we got to the actual scrimmage?
Yeah, I've been to 2 practices so far. So the first practice I was at was the third practice of spring. It was the first one with pads. And so that what they did there and what they did it was more like an hour probably at least before they went to the scrimmage. Those were very, very similar. Big emphasis on special teams for the first half hour probably. And, I think they've always talked about that, but this one, it felt different. It wasn't just 1 or 2 drills that everybody was going through. It was, it was every coach controlling or coaching a certain technique or a certain skill of a certain special team.
Okay.
And for example, you had some kickoff returners and wedge guys over here, and you got some front line guys over there, and inside maybe you're working on some extra point PAT or whatever. But there was different things going on at every different station, and it really felt to me like they got a ton of good special teams work.
Okay.
And this is one thing I will say, I really, we've both said it a lot. I don't want to ever say anything bad about the previous staff because I do think they did a great job. But I think from what I've seen so far with their special teams emphasis, it seems to be more. And it seems to be like they're getting more focused special teams work done.
Okay.
They've obviously got a good kicker and punter and multiple guys there. So that was one thing that definitely stood out. The next is just the total numbers. And obviously spring, you're always going to have fewer guys because all the freshmen aren't in yet. But the fewer numbers that were out there, you were able to get – there was very little standing around.
Could you feel the fewer numbers? Did it seem smaller? Did it seem like a smaller roster?
Yes, it did.
It did.
You could definitely tell. And it's always a little like that in the spring because all the freshmen aren't in yet and the seniors are gone.
Sure.
But this was because I've been to spring ball for 25 straight years. I went to 1 or 2 in the fall and 1 or 2 in the spring. So I've been going to these practices forever. And this felt like, other than maybe Callahan years, this felt like a very small team. And maybe I was just comparing it to the last 5
gotcha.
where it was just And it really felt like every kid was able to get more work whether they were splitting up doing stations or when they were scrimmaging. 1s versus 1s here, 2s versus 2s here, 3s versus 3s there. There weren't really 5s anywhere. They just weren't there because there weren't enough guys. So when they were doing 7-on-7, inside run, whatever, everybody was going. Each one of those groups maybe had 1 or 2 subs that would rotate in. But there was never a time, and there was time in the last several years where you would have guys that would kind of stand there and for a lot of practice. And they were still getting multiple groups going. There were just so many guys. It was just almost impossible to get them all rolling. So that was another big thing. And you've all heard about the quarterbacks were live in the scrimmage. The scrimmage was awesome. I mean, it was very physical. And we were talking about the green jerseys on the quarterbacks, and we're like, gee, when did we start, making these wimp quarterbacks that got to wear green? And then all of a sudden it was live and they were taking them down hard.
Really?
Yeah, it was
fully to the ground.
Full to the ground with the QBs. Yeah, it was And I haven't seen that since Frank Solich. So.
Were they wearing green jerseys, or were they actually? So they were wearing green jerseys, but it was
target.
But it was
yeah, and they were doing different tempos. So at the beginning they were doing some thud, but it wasn't much. It was far more full than it was thud. So yeah, it was full tilt to the ground for most of the scrimmage.
I just asked this. I had Adam Carricker on yesterday, and I brought this up to him because in 2005 he was on the team, and I've mentioned this countless times on the show. So Redcasters, you've heard this before, but
here we go.
Were you at it, or do you remember the scrimmage where Joe Daly came into the scrimmage as a starting quarterback, and Zach Taylor ended the 2-hour 200 play scrimmage as the starter?
Was that the coaches clinic scrimmage?
It was the coaches clinic weekend.
I'm sure I was there. Yeah, I think I remember what you're talking about. I've been to every clinic for 25 years.
Yeah,
so
it was for me.
They beat the hell out of him for most of that scrimmage. They beat the hell out of Zach, but he just kept getting up and making first downs. I
catch so much grief for this because I've been saying the green jersey thing since the start of the Redcast for the last 6 years. But that weekend, that scrimmage was so formative in my mind as a coach, and it. You can't learn real football things about players if you don't go out and do some football at some point. You've got to play. And I always said Joe Daly, no disrespect to him. My goodness, that guy's, he's coaching in the pros, and the dude has forgotten more football than I'll never know, right? But he looked like the perfect quarterback in every drill.
I feel like
every time. But once you throw a little bit of the live bullets against him, and that's where Zach Taylor started to rise up it. And that's something Carricker talked about yesterday, was how tough Taylor was. And they learned that in that scrimmage. And you really can't learn it unless you tackle the guy and you take him to the ground. He has to get up and he has to run a huddle and he has to run the next play and do real football. And so anyways, I want to go back to Saturday. Now this Saturday, with that kind of in my mind, did you see anything out of the quarterbacks? Were there any, did you see some tales where, oh man, that guy did something really good. He got up, he took a big hit, or anything impress you that way?
Well, every year at these early practices, so that would have been, I think, the 7th practice, I think. The offense usually stinks. The defense is always ahead.
Right.
Excuse me. But I was very pleasantly surprised. The offense looked pretty good. I mean, running the ball and throwing the ball. And I'll tell you what, Sims looks good. He looks good. He looks the part. And then, the first practice I saw, it was hard to tell because it was, there were a lot of drill work, 7-on-7. You got don't worry about any rush. I mean, the 7-on-7 quarterback is a 7-on-7 quarterback. But on that scrimmage, I mean, he ran it. He threw it. He looked good. I thought Harburg looked good. And it was obvious that they were trying to give Harburg some, let him run it a little bit. He just looked big and strong and athletic. Standing by Heinrich Harburg. And I have no clue if he'll ever play a snap. I don't know, but he looked big and athletic, and he ran the ball very well in the scrimmage. So, I thought those two guys looked very, very good. The receivers, I can't think of his name, the new receiver from Virginia.
Billy Kemp?
Yes. He did a lot of good things. He caught the ball. He even ran the ball a couple times. I think he'll be an impact player. I mean, obviously he was where he was at. So, there was – the offensive line, I think, is going to be pretty decent. I mean, getting Murray back was a big thing.
Yeah.
You got quite a bit of experience in there. Prohaska coming back.
If we can keep him healthy.
Yeah. You think you feel like we're not returning a ton of offensive linemen, but then Nuri's going to be a big one. I mean, he's important. And I think Prohaska's got a chance to be phenomenal. So I think you got some good offensive linemen.
And Turner, and Corcoran and Benhart, they got a ton of experience, and they were pretty big time recruits when we got them. And Honke, I know you've said this a million times, and I tend to agree with you. They were big recruits when we got them. If they're getting developed and the offense is a little more structured and a little more targeted to what they want to do and build on strengths, there's no reason to think these guys couldn't make a big jump. If I offered you a 6 foot, what is he, 6'10"?
Oh, 6'10", Prohaska, 6'9".
Say Benhart. Say if I offered you a 6'9", offensive tackle who has tons of starting experience in the Big Ten and put him in the transfer portal, don't you think you'd want that guy?
Oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying? We have that guy. So it's like, I don't know. We could see how he can develop too, but I mean, I'm very interested in the offensive line this year. And I'm not in the camp of thinking that we didn't do enough to address it necessarily. I'm not. I think I think the way we address the offensive line is coaching up the guys that we have personally.
And there were a lot of new faces that I'd never seen before, and I didn't know who they were. A lot of transfers, big dudes. Now, overall, there weren't a ton of offensive linemen,
right?
But there were a fair amount of brand new guys that I've never seen before, and a couple of them were playing with the ones. So, I can't even comment on who the heck they were, but they were big and they were different guys. So I think there's going to be some new guys coming in playing those positions too.
Could be.
Ben Scott's the transfer from Arizona State, the center. Now he was out on Saturday.
Yes,
they said he was back in practice today.
He's probably going to start.
Yeah, he's back in practice today. Did you notice who was playing center and how were the snaps and everything? I mean, did you see any signs of concern there?
No, he was a guy that I didn't know. I didn't recognize him, so I couldn't tell you who it was. And we were talking about him. Me and my coaching staff were talking about him specifically. He was doing a good job, and the snaps were beautiful, but I have no idea who he was. So, yeah, I don't know. And I'll tell you what, the defense looks so much different. It looks
different. How?
Not even the same. It's just that schematically, personnel. It's just it's just as a whole different world. It's going to be a lot more movement, a lot more, just kind of letting them fly a little bit more.
Interesting.
I think you're going to see a lot more blitz, a lot more, just a lot of. It's going to be the whole structure of the whole thing is just not going to look like anything that we've ever had in Lincoln.
Interesting.
Least, and I think Shenander's stuff was very, very good, but it was a lot of just classic defense, whether it was the 3-4 that we started with or the 4-man front from the last couple of years. This one, it's and you got a little bit of a taste of those 3-3s, in the bowl games. It's not the same as TCU's 3-3-5, but something like that. And I watched Syracuse play in the bowl game just so I could kind of get a look, and it does look similar to what Syracuse had, but like they said, they're going to morph it to the dudes we have.
Yeah.
And so, we had a lot of guys that weren't suited up or injured. Reimer didn't play a whole lot, and you still got Henrich out, and so who knows what exactly it's going to look like. They could have 4 guys with their hand in the ground, maybe. So, but it definitely looked a lot different.
That's what I was, wondering at points too, is that, how much flexibility is there between some of this is your personnel. I'd made the statement before that you can make the argument you need less defensive linemen in a 4-man front versus a 3-man front, because the 3-man front, they all need to be 270, 280 guys. In a 4-man front, you need the 2 big dudes in the middle, and then your outside guys can be some of those edge guys. And we have plenty of those edge guys, whether it's Gunnarsson or Chief Borders or, Jamari Butler, those guys that are more in the 240 range. So, there could be times where I think size-wise and depth-wise, they may have more of the bodies to do more 4-man front if that's what they choose to do.
Well, and that is, in my opinion, the position group that was the lightest of any was a defensive line. I mean, I would have – I mean, the guys we had a lot of good ones out there. Ty Robinson didn't even suit up, so I didn't see him. But we were definitely light, and I'm not saying light physically, just few bodies. There just weren't a ton of defensive linemen out there. So I think that's probably something that who knows if they're going to go shopping in the portal or what they're going to do, but I think we got to improve that a little bit. And I think you're going to maybe see a few more, you're going to have more positions probably for those 215 to 20 pound hybrid type linebackers, a little bit more guys like the Taggy and the, guys like that can get out there and run a little bit more in this defense, just because it relies so much on blitzing and moving around and things like that. So, previous years, you could have a couple giant guys up front and, some of those old school typical middle linebackers that could make reads and, you kind of start stationary, make a read and then get to the ball. I think we're going to be dictating a little bit more going forward where we're just blitzing, And so I think you can maybe get a little bit more speed out on the field that way. And to me, Reimer is built perfect for this defense. I mean, because he's a dude that can get out and run and go. I mean, he's, they didn't know if he was going to be a safety or a linebacker when he first got here, so I think this defense is built perfect for Reimer. So you might see him have a big season. He has to love how this thing's set up.
Are they rotating a lot? I mean, it's probably a little limited in spring, but it sounds like one of the things Rhule really wants to do is make sure there's a heavy rotation in that defense.
Yeah. When they sent out the ones, there was multiple different guys going out there with the ones. So it appeared. And you know what? It's a brand new staff. They're still trying to fill out personnel. They're trying to figure out, I'm sure they have no idea. And you know what? Everybody who's still on the team's got a shot right now.
Yeah.
And so they just had a lot of guys. It wasn't like there was just 11 that went out with the ones. It was a lot of different. And they would go, so the scrimmage went 1s on 1s, 2s on 2s, 3s on 3s, and then back. And then they'd put them in situations. There's 2 minutes to go. The offense is down by 2 points, 1 timeout, whatever. And then they did some goal line. And then they did some inside the inside the 20 red zone. So they put them in all types of different situations. And then they, like I said, they did each situation with 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, and 3 versus 3.
Okay. Now I know our listeners will want to hear this. When they got into goal line, please tell me we got into shotgun, right? Is that what we did at the one? Or I mean,
no, there was definitely an I formation sighting there. So
that actually leads me. I was going to switch back to the offense.
I do. I want to touch back on with the running backs eventually. So
sure. Back. Well, there's 2 positions I think that Coach Osborne used to always use so well, and really was a differentiator for us. It was fullbacks. It was tight ends. Every team has some running backs. Every team has some fast receivers. But those 2 positions set us apart. And right now, when we look at what we have right now on this team, tight end has gotten a lot of talk. Yeah. There's a lot of size and some real talent there. Sure. It's young and it's been inexperienced.
Promise.
So a lot of promise. And then the fullback is the other spot too. Is what are we seeing out of that? So I guess in those 2 areas, there are personnel groupings and all that, 12 and 22 and all that. What kind of personnel groupings and what did you see from those positions?
Well, I mean. I think you're going to probably see mostly a spread offense, but they did have some I formation. They put in situations. They put a fullback out there. I don't know that these guys haven't really been able to recruit yet like they want to. So I don't know that we have the big old burly typical Nebraska fullbacks out there even yet. But they took a kid. Kluver, I think is his name, Clover, who was a defensive lineman, I think, and they bumped him over to fullback. So they're trying to find those body types right now to get those fullbacks out there. There's new tight. I mentioned there was new linemen that I didn't know. There's new tight ends that I don't know. There was a kid number 99. I should have a roster on me, but I don't. Who a big tight end, not necessarily tall, but big. I mean, looks almost like a small offensive lineman, but he caught some passes and he's obviously nimble with good hands. I think Fedone, if we got to do everything we can to keep that kid healthy because he's pretty special. And, he's 3rd year in the program now and he's big. I mean,
does he look noticeably bigger?
He looks big. He looks the part for sure. So I really hope we get to see him out there on Saturdays because I think he could be a big-time player. I really do. He's got the look of as good as – I don't know. I hate to hype him up too much. He's never been out on the field. But from what I've seen, I think he can be darn good. And then they got the kid from Creighton Prep.
Rollins?
Yeah, Rollins playing tight end, and he looks big. And, whether he's – a part of things once the season gets going. I don't know, but
I thought they were talking about moving him.
Well, he was one of the gray shirts in a practice where he was playing both offense and defense. So you're saying on Saturday at least they had him playing offense.
I saw him playing offense. Yeah,
playing tight end.
Okay. And he looks the part too. I mean, he's a big, strong dude.
He's run. You have Gilbert, the transfer from Georgia, and he was a big time.
I never noticed him. I don't know if he was hurt. Okay. I don't know. I did not. Yeah, I forgot about him, and I did not notice him. I don't know. I noticed, like I said, Fedone, and then this other kid. So yeah, I forgot all about that guy. I don't know.
Now you mentioned Kluver being moved over to fullback. I have to admit, this would have been back in January, and we were prognosticating on the Redcast. But there's a certain kid wearing number 41. I threw out as a name.
Clearly, that's a fullback number all day.
I mean, you know him better than can you squelch those Redcast rumors? Is that not happening, or could
Well,
could
no,
you
he's
see someone like
linebacker. I mean, he was out there with the top groups. He kid's never been hurt, and he popped his hip flexor. It's probably not. I'm hoping he'll be fine for the last week or so and be able to play in the spring game. But no, he's playing linebacker. You know, he's like all the other kids. It's new staff and hoping to get a shot out there. But yeah, he was playing with some of the upper groups during the scrimmage, and but he was recruited hard by Kansas State, Iowa State. They wanted him real bad for like a fullback.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought there was in his recruitment he was kind of a not a tweener. What do you call? Just but there was a he was being recruited as two different, like
an off the line tight end, like a wing type of tight end.
What's his eligibility?
He's got 2 years left.
He's got 2 years left. Okay.
And he might even, I don't know if he's going to take it or not, but he could even potentially get a medical hardship for last year if he wanted to. He hasn't applied for anything yet, but no, he's got 2 years left for sure, though.
Okay.
This is fifth, and then the COVID year after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a weird experience for him. Like, what a weird time to go to college. Just strange.
No, it has been crazy. I mean, like I said, those guys have been through the ringer, and they've been through so many crazy things with COVID and that whole stupid lawsuit with that ridiculous junk.
Crazy.
And, they've been through a lot. So
not typical.
How has I guess again, this put your parent hat back on for a second. How has the transition been for him? Like we've heard some players, for some players, this is going to be brand new and they're going to like it. They're not going to like it. Or maybe there's somebody who is just looking for that another chance, a new set of eyes on him. Yeah. For someone like Garrett, I mean, has this been a fresh set of eyes on him, giving him a new chance? I mean, how has he kind of viewed the changes?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And, last year was a great opportunity for him, but he was going with the ones. He was rotating with Reimer, and Reimer and Henrich were the starters, but Garrett was rotating with those guys all through the spring, or not the spring, the preseason, the fall camp with the starters. And 2 days before they left for Ireland, he had a lineman fall on his foot and he tore his plantar fascia, and it cost him 8 weeks. So, and that was a frustrating thing because there were some injuries in there, and he would have been right in the middle of everything. And you come back 8 weeks later and they got a new defensive coordinator and everything's different. And he went from maybe even starting a few of those games with those injuries they had to, not really playing much at all. So that last year was personally for him was very frustrating, I would say. And so, that was, if he would have stayed healthy, he would have been in the middle of things last year. This year, I mean, I think everybody, it's a fresh start for everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's, they know that Luke Reimer's a stud. They know that he's a starter and he's a man. There's certain guys that, but even so, I mean, every coach, they're going to give everybody a chance, and they're going to evaluate. And that's like I said in the scrimmage, even though they said ones, there was a lot of different guys going in with those groups. Yeah, just because they're trying to get eyes on every kid, they're trying to evaluate them. Because the spring, you're trying to teach the offenses and defense to those kids, but it's also those coaches, new coaches, evaluating them. Because you can watch film all you want, but once you see them live in person, that's where you can really evaluate them. So, I mean,
it's probably the truest evaluation they ever get as a team.
What's that?
It's probably the truest evaluation you can ever get of a team, because you don't have any recruiting bias or anything like that. You just show up. It's all like, hey, who can play for me? It's got to be invigorating for your son, just to kind of be like, all right, clean slate, no history. Everybody's starting from scratch. We're all learning a new defense, and and I think that's probably true for a lot of guys for a lot of positions. And that's exactly what this team needs. I think a lot of these guys to get these, there's, I guess my point is there's talent on this team. And it's not going to surprise me if we have a good turnaround, if we can extract some of this talent, and focus it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so many new bodies out there too. I mean, there's a lot of potential for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's transition just a little bit away. We started talking a little bit about potential there, and we talked a little bit about expectations. Coach, I mean, you got to see the team. as you kind of go into this is something I've been doing with the fan forum too. What are your expectations for year one? What are the things that you really want to see come out of this offseason? And it can be a win total if you want to say that, or it can just be, what are the culture? What are the things that you want to see be accomplished? If we're sitting here having the same conversation in January next year.
Well, I'd like to be somewhere warm in January. That would be nice. I mean, I've been a dad for 4 years and I haven't been to a bowl game, so that would be awesome. But the great thing about these coaches, they've got experience, or Coach Rhule at least does. I mean, they've got experience at multiple schools, different levels. He's been a head coach a long time, and a lot of the previous staffs, Mike Riley had a ton of experience, but, Bill Callahan didn't have a ton of head coaching experience. Bo Pelini didn't have a ton of head coaching experience. Frost only had a couple of years of head coaching experience. And sometimes when you haven't been the head guy for a long time, things like game management are tough sometimes. Culture building is tough sometimes. And I'm not just talking about the last staff, but, some of the previous ones all the way back down the road. Matt Rhule's been there. He's done that. He's turned around programs. I don't think he's going to make too many mistakes in game, or when when we're down by 5 points with the ball with a minute and a half to go or whatever. He's not going to get shaken. He's going to know how to handle those situations. So I'm excited about those little things going our way.
Yeah.
I'm excited about, because you say, well, geez, we were so close. But when you're just so close and you're on the wrong end so many consecutive times, there's obviously something wrong at some level. And like we mentioned earlier, it's a lot of those little things that start from day one when they get here. A lot of those little things, like whether it's how you interact with the kids in the locker room, or how little ways that you practice, or little things in the strength and conditioning program, or whatever. But all those little things add up to whether or not you win those close games. I mean, and so I'm excited to see, and my expectation is that these guys are going to build that culture that they want. They're going to get those little things taken care of. I mean, Coach Rhule came unglued in the scrimmage the other day because, we had a scrimmage in the red zone, a fumble in the red zone during the scrimmage, and a penalty in the red zone. He wasn't happy about that. He wasn't going to allow that stuff to happen. So that's what I want to see. I want to see us be able to come through in those big moments and just find a way to get it done. It's just unbelievable to me how our kids never quit. They never quit. We only got blown out once in the last 4 years that I can remember, and that was Oklahoma last year. We never quit, but yet at the same time, so many of those games we lost close ones. These guys, I'm hoping we'll be able to switch that just because of their experience they've had as coaches.
I love what you said there about Rhule in the red zone and fumbling and that driving him crazy and having a penalty. Really fumbling and turnovers anywhere drives the coach crazy. It takes me back to 95 and Frazier and Behringer having a battle going into their senior year. Who's going to be the starter? And, the story goes that Behringer had one extra turnover. I think it was an extra interception in one scrimmage. And Osborne, he graded everything. And that was the difference. We aren't going to turn the ball over. And that's how important it was. One play like that could be the difference between you playing or not at that position. And, we've had enough games now. And this is where I say it's not the little things, right? It's not turning the ball over isn't a little thing, or that penalty, back-to-back penalties to start a game or whatever. Those aren't little things. They're real, fundamental things. And I love seeing the coach. I love hearing you say that he really hit on that as being important there. So I love that. I want to get out of here talking about one other thing, and that is Coach Solich is going to be back for the spring game. We mentioned, our first coaches clinic, we were there during Solich. You've been all the way back to the Solich era as well. What does that mean to you, Coach, to see Frank coming back for the first time since 2003 and to see him, what are you expecting to see on spring game as he's being welcomed back in Memorial Stadium?
I would have to assume it's going to be a roaring ovation. I would have to expect that. I mean, I know I'll be yelling. I was very excited, and I think the previous staff wanted to get him in too, but it was, maybe it's just because he's out of of coaching now that he's coming back and doing that. But I think it's awesome. I think it's great that these guys, and we mentioned their feelings towards Coach Osborne, but them reaching out to Coach Solich too. You know, one thing that drove me nuts about Bill Callahan when he took the job is he wanted to just, hey, we got to change the culture. We got to, you know, this is my team. We're doing it this way. That didn't work. You know, these guys realize, yeah, they're going to do it their way, but they still want to reach out to the past, because how can you not at this place? I mean, how can you not have some reverence for the past and want to reach out for the past? And so I'm super excited that he's coming in, and I think you're going to see the stadium really, really be excited as well. And I think you'll get a great ovation. And I hope that Coach Solich is, and I do not know Coach Solich personally, but I really would have to assume that it's going to be a special day for him. And I hope it is, because he's a pretty important guy in the history of Nebraska football. I mean, and so it's really a neat thing to get him back.
Yeah, and the history of Nebraska football, it's a storied and tradition-rich history. And one of my favorite stories is hearing Osborne when he became AD, right after Peterson left, and they had just built that new North Stadium, brand new. I remember one of the coaches' clinics right afterwards. It looked beautiful, but it was white walls. There was nothing on them. And Osborne, he was asked a couple of weeks into being the AD, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, the walls are pretty bare. We're gonna get some of those championship trophies up. We're gonna get some of those Hall of Fame, pictures up that the players were taking photos in front of. We're gonna start to show some of that history. And we've had the blessing on this show of having Tyler Kai, the associate AD at Nebraska, on, and he helped with all the fundraising and everything. And he's given us a lot of the insight on what's going on with the new North facility. I think that's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see that open up. I think it's going to be amazing for players, for recruits, and for us fans. There's going to be areas for us to go into and see some of that history. So I think that's going to be an awesome thing to see open.
Well, it sounds like the players might even get in there this summer. I don't think the coaches are moving in until end of August or the beginning of September, but it's getting close. I mean, we didn't get to go through it and tour it or anything, but I was right up close to it, and boy, it's coming along. It's almost there. So I'm like you. I remember when they built the new North Stadium, and I remember going through there and looking around and thinking, how can anything possibly ever be better than this? And then not too long later, all of a sudden, everybody catches up with us. I'm like, wow. Yeah. And so through Garrett's recruiting, we went through some of these other big stadiums, and I'm really was blown away. So I think this one is going to be special from some of the things I'm seeing that's going in there. So I'm really excited to see it. I'm really happy that Garrett gets to be a part of it for a couple of years too. And so I really am excited to take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I've heard is that the football team, they're going to move football related things into it first before they get all the other things done. But the football team should be in there by the fall. As you mentioned, coaching staff might trickle in a little later, then eventually the training table and some of the study areas and things that will open as it gets done. But it should be an amazing facility.
Yeah.
Well, It is time for our parting shots here. And Mac, I'll let you start off. And then, as is our tradition on the show, we always allow our guests to have the final one. So, Mac, take it away.
Oh, well, I just want to thank our guests tonight. It was so fun talking to you. It was great to be able to kind of see behind the scenes and hear that it's the same kind of stuff we're hearing in front of the camera. So that's lovely. And, it was a beautiful day out today. Spring is in the air. I can go to the spring game, so that's fantastic. I had to get my tickets back from Dave. Sorry, Dave.
Mac
my dates wrong.
Mac thought he had a family reunion that weekend, then realized he didn't, so he gave his tickets away and then had to take them back.
Yeah, as soon as I found out, I'm like, oh, I got them wrong. I'm like, hey, Dave, give it back. Sorry. But it was like, for me and my son ain't ever gonna play for the Huskers. Bless his heart. But he's a good boy. But like the spring game's kind of our jam, man. We get to go and do our own thing. So I love going to the spring game.
All right, Coach, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, it's like we've said, every time a new staff comes in, there's always excitement and enthusiasm, and everybody's kind of excited about the new stuff to come. But I think they got the right guy. I think they got the right staff. I think the players are bought in. I'm excited. It's not going to come at once. We're probably not going to win a national title this year. But I want to see improvement, and I think we will, because I think they're going about it all the right way. So it's a fun and exciting time to be a Husker fan, to be a Husker dad, and I think it's going to be a good year. So I'm like you. I volunteered to run the discus at a track meet on the day of the spring game, and I just realized it 2 or 3 days ago. So I got to make that call tomorrow and tell them, sorry, I can't run the discus at the York Yowl track meet because I got to be at the spring game. So I'm really excited to see that stadium full again. It's always a really cool football fix in the middle of the spring to get into that stadium. You know, a lot of tailgating before and get into the stadium and see all the kids get out there and play. I hope Garrett's hip is healed so he can get out there and get some.
I hope so too.
Absolutely.
Hope so too.
But no, thanks for having me on again. I love doing this. I love talking Huskers. I've been a diehard Husker fan since birth. My whole family is. My son Dalton, my son Garrett, my wife Allison. We love them. You can see right back here, I guess. We're Husker fans since birth. So we love it and love talking about it and be happy to do it anytime.
Well, we'd love to have you back.
How's
Dalton doing, and how's recruiting and everything going there for him?
He's going. He got a scholarship. Well, he broke his leg in the last game of the regular season during his senior year, but he played at the end of basketball, and right now he's running track, and he got a scholarship. He's going to play H-back at UNK.
Coach Held.
Yeah, so I'm excited. It's got kind of a mini Nebraska feel up there with Coach Colby Ellis is the offensive coordinator. He was a GA here, so it's exciting. I'm happy. I there might even be a few weeks I might be able to get to a morning game in Lincoln and an afternoon game. And
how quick can you get to? How quick can you get to Kearney from York?
I can get to Kearney. I can get to the stadium about an hour and 25.
Hour 25. Okay.
From here to Lincoln, it's an hour. So it's works pretty much perfect for us. Dalton was really considering Sioux Falls, and I'd have been happy to go there, but I'm a lot happier to go to Kearney instead of Sioux Falls.
Man.
We are road warriors during the season. I'm telling you, we've only missed 2 games, and that was both at Rutgers games. One of them because during COVID they didn't allow parents in, and this year was because it was on Friday night and I was coaching. And I didn't go to Ireland. My wife went to Ireland.
That's great. Yeah.
You mentioned that the last time you were on, you're like, it's our opener. I think you were at Lexington, and your wife was going to. Ireland. She kept
FaceTiming me from the pubs when I was in the middle of teaching class because of the time difference. So
that's cold.
That was rough, but
you guys got the win.
We go to every game and we love it. So we're going to be putting on more miles, and we'll keep doing it. We're
going to the Minnesota game.
Yeah, we'll be at Minnesota and Colorado the first 2. So if we see you out there, love that.
And the Minnesota's on a Thursday. Dalton's first UNK game's on a Thursday, and that Minnesota game. But I think I hate doing this, but I might miss a practice on Thursday night so I can get down to that game in Minnesota. But I'll be the one wearing red. So if you see me, that'll be me.
Well, Coach, thank you so much. Great luck. Best of luck to the York Dukes this year. And best of luck also to Garrett, to Dalton. Best health wishes on everyone. We hate to hear injuries, so best health there. And thank you so much again, Mac. Yeah. It's been a blast.
Yeah, so much fun.
This has been another Go Big Redcast.
A Herd at Sports Network production.